Atlanta, Georgia, a warm summer night. Streetlights hum over a quiet black neighborhood, the kind where families grill ribs on Sundays and neighbors still wave when they pass. But on this night, silence is broken. Not by laughter, not by music, but by screams. Police are called to a two-story brick home on the city's west side. What they discover inside will haunt even the most seasoned officers. In the master bedroom, a young woman lies sprawled across the bed, motionless. Blood splatters across the walls, dripping slowly onto a wedding portrait that hangs crooked above the headboard. Her name is Keisha Williams, 29 years old, a nurse, a daughter, a sister, a wife. A woman whose life just 1 year earlier seemed like the very picture of Black love and resilience. But tonight, that love story has ended in tragedy. And her husband? Marcus Williams, nowhere to be found. Detectives step carefully through the home, their flashlights bouncing across overturned candles, shattered glass, and a dining table still set with champagne flutes and a half-eaten anniversary dinner. On the table sits a gift box, its lid tossed aside. Inside, only a folded piece of paper soaked in blood, a note written in Marcus's handwriting. For every lie, there's a price. The officers exchange glances. They know instantly this isn't random. This is personal. This is rage. And Marcus, the man who vowed before God, family, and friends to protect Keisha, is now their prime suspect. But what drove Marcus Williams, a church-going construction worker, loved in his neighborhood, to turn from a groom full of promise into a fugitive, wanted for murder? The answer doesn't begin tonight. No, it begins 1 year earlier, on a night that should have been sacred. A night that sealed their bond before heaven. A night that every bride and groom remember forever, their wedding night. But Keisha had a secret, and that secret would ignite a chain of events that ended in blood. Imagine this. The wedding is over. The church choir has sung. The reception plates are cleared. Friends and family are still buzzing from the celebration. Marcus is at the hotel waiting for his bride. He's ready to start forever. But Keisha? She's gone. She slipped away, and she isn't with her husband. She's with another man, an old flame. Her ex-boyfriend, Darius Coleman. That single act of betrayal would become the shadow over their entire marriage. He didn't know it at the time, but whispers spread. Rumors grew. And when the truth finally reached him, forgiveness was never an option. Now, as detectives photograph the crime scene, they see symbols everywhere. The toppled cake, the unopened champagne, the blood on the wedding portrait. It's as if Marcus wanted the entire house to tell the story of promises broken, of vows shattered, of love turned into a weapon. The neighbors who called the police say they heard arguing. They heard a woman scream, begging for her life. Then silence. When the officers arrived minutes later, Marcus was gone. His car missing, his phone abandoned on the kitchen counter. But what Marcus left behind would tell investigators everything they needed to know about his state of mind. That note inside the gift box wasn't the only message. Hidden in the drawer of the nightstand was a flash drive. On it, a video. A confession. Marcus speaking directly into the camera, staring into the lens with cold, burning eyes. But the detectives wouldn't watch that video until later. For now, all they had was the body of a young woman, the scent of iron in the air, and a missing husband whose gift had become a weapon. And as news of Keisha's death spread through the neighborhood, questions erupted. How could a man who danced with his wife just 12 months ago, who held her hand at church, who toasted to forever at the family barbecue, how could that same man now be a killer? To understand that, we have to go back. Back to the beginning of their love story. Back to the very night Keisha made a choice she could never take back. Because the truth is, The seeds of her murder were planted not 1 year into the marriage, but on the very night it began. This is not just a story about love gone wrong. It's a story about betrayal, about revenge, about the fragile line between devotion and destruction. And before the story is done, you'll be left wondering, was this tragedy preventable, or was it always inevitable? Marcus Williams didn't buy his wife flowers. He didn't buy her jewelry. He gave her a gift that would silence her forever. And as detectives closed in on the truth, they would uncover just how far Marcus planned this moment and why Keisha never saw it coming.
To everyone watching from the outside, Marcus and Keisha Williams were the image of Black love. Their wedding wasn't just an event, it was a celebration of culture, family, and community. The kind of wedding where the music never stopped, the food overflowed, and elders smiled with pride as they watched two young people promise forever. Marcus grew up on the west side of Atlanta, raised by his grandmother after his mother passed when he was just 13. He was a quiet kid who learned early that if he wanted something, he'd have to work for it. By the time he met Keisha, he was a man with calloused hands, earning his living in construction, pouring sweat into every foundation he built. Keisha, on the other hand, was a caregiver by nature. A nurse at Grady Memorial, she was known for working double shifts and still finding the energy to check in on her younger sister after school. People admired her drive. She had a warm laugh, the kind that made strangers feel like family. When Marcus met her at a mutual friend's cookout, he swore she lit up the whole yard. For Marcus, Keisha wasn't just another woman. She was the answer to years of loneliness. She was proof that life could give him something good. And for Keisha, Marcus was stability. A man who wouldn't run the streets, who wouldn't waste her time. Together, they looked unstoppable. The wedding was everything they dreamed of. A Black church packed with friends and relatives. The choir singing total praise, bridesmaids in burgundy dresses, the groom and his men in tailored black suits, the smell of fried chicken and collard greens waiting at the reception hall. Their first dance under string lights, her white gown flowing, his hand steady on her waist. It was perfect. Until it wasn't. When the last song played and the reception ended, Marcus headed to the hotel suite where they would spend their first night as husband and wife. He imagined the beginning of forever. He imagined holding his bride close, whispering promises meant only for her ears. But Keisha, she wasn't there. She slipped away, and she wasn't alone. While Marcus waited, Keisha was meeting someone else, her ex-boyfriend, Darius Coleman. Darius was no secret. He was the smooth-talking man from her past who never quite let go. The one her friends warned her about, the one her family never trusted. And on the night she pledged her life to Marcus, she chose to see Darius one last time. Some say it was closure. Some say it was temptation she couldn't resist. But whatever her reason, Keisha's decision would set fire to her marriage before it even began. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. By morning, Marcus finally had his bride. She walked into their suite smiling, pretending the night had been hers alone. Marcus never suspected a thing, at least not then. But whispers have a way of traveling. In neighborhoods like theirs, where everyone knows everyone, lies rarely stay hidden. At first it was subtle, a strange look from one of Keisha's cousins, a comment at a barbecue, a laugh Marcus couldn't quite understand. Then came the rumor, Darius boasting to friends that he had been with Keisha the very night she said "I do." Marcus brushed it off. At least that's what he told people. But inside, the thought burned. It ate at him during long hours at work, when he lay awake beside her at night, when he stared at their wedding photo on the wall. Did she? Could she? The doubt grew like rot in the foundation of their marriage. Keisha, for her part, acted as if nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, kissed him goodbye in the mornings, showed up to family gatherings with her smile intact. But guilt has a way of showing itself in the smallest cracks. The hesitations, the excuses for late shifts, the phone she kept face down on the counter. Marcus noticed everything. And so, 1 year later, as Marcus planned their first anniversary, he wasn't thinking about celebration. He wasn't thinking about love. He was thinking about betrayal. He was thinking about revenge. And in his mind, he wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a man preparing to settle a debt. The world saw Marcus as the devoted husband, but in his heart, he had already become something else. Something Keisha would never see coming. The anniversary dinner was supposed to be a symbol of new beginnings. Instead, it became the stage for a chilling finale. Because Marcus didn't just bring wine and candles to the table, he brought a gift wrapped with rage, a gift that promised no escape. And when Keisha opened it, she would understand too late that the sins of one night had finally come due.
The first year of marriage is supposed to be the sweetest. For Marcus and Keisha, it began with smiles and Sunday dinners. They moved into a modest 2-story brick home on Atlanta's west side, just a short drive from Keisha's hospital job. To the outside world, they were a young black couple, building the dream. Steady jobs, a new house, plans for children in the future. Marcus poured his energy into his work. Long days in construction left his hands cracked and calloused, but the thought of coming home to Keisha made it worth it. And Keisha, balancing night shifts as a nurse, still made time for family cookouts, church on Easter, and quiet evenings with her husband. Their photos told the story of a happy pair, matching t-shirts at Six Flags, smiling at the Hawks game, her sitting on his lap at a cousin's barbecue. To anyone scrolling their feeds, they were #BlackLove personified. But behind the likes and the captions, a storm was gathering. Because Marcus never forgot the whispers. He never forgot the rumors about Darius. And once a seed of doubt is planted, it grows in silence until it overtakes everything. Marcus started to watch Keisha closely. When she worked late, he checked the clock. When her phone buzzed, he noticed if she turned it face down. He memorized her stories, looking for cracks in the details. A late shift at the hospital, a girls' night out, an unexpected errand. To Marcus, every explanation became another question. He didn't confront her, not at first. Instead, he carried that suspicion like a stone in his chest. At work, he grew quieter. At family gatherings, more withdrawn. His friends noticed, but when they asked, he brushed them off with a quick, "I'm good, man." In truth, he was anything but. Keisha, meanwhile, seemed determined to pretend nothing was wrong. She laughed with her friends, doted on her nieces, posted anniversary countdowns on social media. If guilt weighed on her, she never showed it. But guilt has a way of leaking through even the smallest cracks, and Marcus noticed everything. The nights she came home tired, but her hair and makeup were still fresh. The time she avoided eye contact when he asked simple questions. The way she locked her phone even in the privacy of their own living room. To Marcus, every action confirmed his worst fear, that the whispers about Darius weren't just rumors, that his wife had betrayed him, not just once, but maybe over and over. He didn't have proof, but he didn't need proof. In his mind, he already knew. And the anger inside him began to change. It wasn't a burst of rage, it was something colder, something calculated, something that grew day by day while the world still thought Marcus was the loyal husband. He stopped sharing his thoughts with Keisha. He stopped dreaming with her about the future. And in the quiet of his mind, Marcus started to plan. Not divorce, not leaving, but punishment. He began journaling at night, filling notebooks with his anger, his pain, his obsession. He searched online for ways men get even. He read stories of betrayal and revenge, and he didn't see monsters in those men. He saw himself. And slowly, the idea of revenge shifted from thought to intention. To Marcus, Keisha no longer represented love. She represented humiliation. She was the woman who walked down the aisle in white, kissed him in front of God, and then, in his mind, laughed at him behind his back. Every smile she gave him felt like a lie, every hug a cover-up, and he decided that one day she would pay for that deception. But on the surface, the marriage went on. They hosted family dinners, they took trips to Savannah, they posted anniversary hashtags. To outsiders, nothing looked broken. That was Marcus's way. Calm on the surface, chaos beneath. Keisha thought time was healing them.
She thought Marcus's silence meant forgiveness. She didn't realize he was keeping score. Every kiss goodnight, every meal they shared was just another step closer to the moment he would deliver her punishment. And that moment came faster than she ever imagined, because as the calendar crept toward their first anniversary, Marcus wasn't planning a celebration. He wasn't buying flowers or jewelry. He was planning something darker. A dinner, yes. A gift, yes. But a gift wrapped not in love, but in rage. The first year of marriage didn't break them apart. It bound Marcus tighter to his anger, his obsession, and his plan. And on the night of their one-year anniversary, Marcus decided Keisha would finally receive what he had been preparing for her all along. Because Marcus believed one truth: love may forgive, but betrayal demands blood.
For almost a year, Marcus carried the weight of suspicion. He had no proof, only whispers and rumors. But in June of that year, proof finally came, and once Marcus saw it, there was no turning back. It started with a phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter. Keisha, rushing to shower before her night shift, left her phone charging by the sink. Marcus, sitting at the table, heard the familiar buzz. Normally, she kept it face down. This time, the screen lit up. A name appeared. A name he knew. Darius Coleman. Marcus opened the phone. What he saw confirmed every suspicion, every whisper, every rumor that had haunted him since their wedding night. Messages, not just one, not just casual, dozens. Some playful, some intimate, some referencing the past, and one message that cut deeper than all the rest. No one will ever love me like you do. Marcus scrolled, his hands shaking, his jaw clenched. The betrayal he had only imagined was now undeniable. His wife, his bride, the woman he had promised forever, had carried another man in her heart all along. And not just any man, her ex. The same man she had slipped away to see on their wedding night. Marcus closed the phone. He didn't confront Keisha. He didn't shout, didn't rage. He simply sat in silence, staring at the walls of the home they built together. And in that silence, a decision took shape. From that day forward, Marcus was no longer wondering if his wife betrayed him. He knew. And knowing gave him something dangerous: clarity. He began to imagine how he would make her understand the pain she caused, how he would make her feel it in her bones, how he would make sure her betrayal did not go unanswered. He grew colder, detached. He no longer touched her with affection. He no longer laughed at her jokes. Keisha noticed, but she chalked it up to stress, to long hours on the job. She had no idea her husband was rehearsing revenge in the quiet of his mind, every single night. Marcus began preparing. At work, he pocketed small tools, things no one would miss, items that could be used to intimidate, to restrain, to wound. At home, he started writing again, this time not in journals, but in letters. Letters filled with venom, spelling out every detail of her betrayal, every wound she had carved into his pride. Each letter ended the same way. For every lie, there's a price. But Marcus didn't just want to punish Keisha. He wanted to perform it. He wanted her family, her friends, maybe even the whole neighborhood to know that he hadn't been blind, that he had been humiliated, that he, Marcus Williams, was reclaiming his power in the most brutal way. In July, Marcus reached out to an old friend, a man who worked at a pawn shop. He purchased a handgun under the table, no paperwork, no questions asked. He brought it home, hid it in a locked box in the garage. And every night while Keisha slept, Marcus would unlock the box, sit on the cold concrete, and hold the weapon in his hands, whispering to himself about justice, about betrayal, about payback. Keisha never noticed the shift in his eyes. She never noticed how often he stared at her phone, how often he asked little questions about her schedule. She thought the first year was just wearing them thin, the way it does for so many couples. She believed they could rebuild. But Marcus wasn't rebuilding. He was tearing everything down. And then came the breaking point. Marcus followed Keisha one evening after her shift. He parked his truck a block away from Grady Memorial and watched as she exited the hospital. She wasn't alone. Darius was there, leaning against his car, waiting. Keisha smiled.
That smile, the one Marcus thought belonged only to him, she gave it to another man. He watched as she hugged Darius, too long, too familiar. And in that moment, Marcus's rage solidified into certainty. There would be no saving their marriage. There would be no forgiveness. That night, when Keisha walked into their home, Marcus was already sitting at the table. He said nothing. She asked about dinner. He only nodded. She kissed his cheek, and he didn't respond. Keisha assumed he was tired, but inside Marcus wasn't tired. He was finished. Finished with pretending. Finished with waiting. Finished with being the fool. Marcus began planning the anniversary dinner. He bought candles, champagne, steak, everything that would make the evening look like a celebration. He ordered a gift box, wrapped it carefully, placed inside not jewelry, but a letter. A letter that spelled out every detail of what he knew, every betrayal, every word she had written to Darius, every lie she had told him. And beside the letter, he placed something else, the weapon. To Keisha, it would look like love. To Marcus, it would be justice. A gift that carried the weight of every secret, every betrayal, every wound she inflicted on his pride. And when she opened it, she would finally understand. Marcus wasn't planning an anniversary. He was planning an execution. And as the night of their first anniversary approached, Marcus sharpened his mind, rehearsed his words, and prepared the table where love would end and vengeance would begin.
Then came their wedding anniversary. The day that should have marked joy and celebration now stood as a silent battlefield. Marcus surprised Tasha with roses, dinner reservations, and even a diamond bracelet she'd once pointed at in a shop window. She gasped, tears glistening, whispering how blessed she was to have a man like him. The friends they invited toasted to black love that lasts, glasses clinking, laughter filling the room. But Marcus's smile that night wasn't one of joy. It was the smirk of a man who knew what was coming. For Marcus had already decided. The real anniversary gift wasn't in the diamonds or the dinner. It was something far more permanent. And while Tasha leaned into his shoulder believing she was regaining his trust, Marcus's mind was already mapping out every step of the plan, because forgiveness had just become the mask for revenge.
When Marcus picked her up, Tasha glowed. A silk black dress hugged her curves. Her hair lay just right, gold hoops swinging from her ears. She posted a quick picture in the mirror with the caption, "1 year strong, God is good." But the smile in that photo would be her last. Dinner was perfect. Marcus held her hand across the table, laughed at her jokes, toasted to new beginnings. To anyone watching, they looked like the couple who had conquered every storm. Tasha leaned close, kissed him, whispered how happy she was that they'd made it through the first year. Marcus nodded, his eyes warm, but inside, he was counting down. After dinner, he suggested they take a late-night drive. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the radio played slow jams from the 90s. Tasha hummed along, smiling as she leaned her head against his shoulder. But Marcus wasn't heading home. He drove farther out, past familiar streets, into a quieter part of town where the streetlights grew thin and the houses disappeared into darkness. "Where we going, baby?" Tasha asked, laughing nervously. Marcus just squeezed her hand and said, "You'll see."
But Marcus wasn't finished. He told her to get out the car, said he had another surprise. Tasha hesitated, the cold creeping in, but she obeyed. She wrapped her arms tight against the chill, heels clicking against the dirt. Marcus led her toward the trunk, his hand firm on the small of her back. "Close your eyes," he whispered. She giggled, nervous but excited, like a girl on prom night. But when she opened her eyes, the gift wasn't roses. It wasn't champagne. It was rope and duct tape. Tasha froze, confusion flooding her face. "Marcus, what's this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. But Marcus didn't answer. His silence was louder than words. His eyes, once full of love, were cold now, empty. The night air grew heavier. The playful romance turned into terror. Tasha stepped back, shaking her head, her hands trembling. "Marcus, stop playing! This ain't funny!" But Marcus wasn't playing. He had rehearsed this moment for months. The betrayal, the lies, the secret nights with Darnell, everything had led here. This wasn't a surprise gift. This was judgment. And in that lonely patch of darkness, with no one around to hear her scream, Marcus prepared to give his wife the gift she would never, ever forget. The night was thick with silence. The trees swayed gently, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the dirt road. In the glow of the car's headlights, Tasha stood frozen, her silk dress catching the wind, her eyes darting from the rope to her husband's face. "Marcus, please, you scare me." Her voice cracked, carrying that same tremor he'd heard when she lied to him before, but this time there was no chance to lie her way out. Marcus stepped closer, his hands calm, steady, practiced. "You think I don't know? You think I ain't seen the calls, the texts, the lies?" Tasha's lips quivered. She shook her head fast. "Baby, no, it's not what you think." But Marcus cut her off with a whisper that chilled her to the bone. "I know everything." Tasha's breath caught. She stumbled backward, but Marcus grabbed her wrist, the grip firm, unrelenting. She tried to yank free, but the weight of his rage was stronger than her fear. The rope slid through his hands like he'd practiced it 1,000 times. And in truth, he had. He looped it with precision, each twist a knot tied with betrayal. Tasha begged, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, we can fix this, please! I love you, I swear I love you!" But those words meant nothing now. He had heard them before, on their wedding night when she whispered them while sneaking off with Darnell. He had replayed those lies in his head too many times, and tonight he was ready to silence them forever. Marcus pressed her against the car, the cold metal biting into her back. He pulled the duct tape, the sound tearing through the night like a warning bell. She thrashed, kicked, her voice breaking into desperate cries. "Baby, please don't do this. Think about Mama. Think about us, please." But Marcus's mind was no longer with Mama, no longer with God, no longer with the vows he once spoke. It was locked on one thought. She betrayed me, and she will pay. And in that desolate clearing, the rope tightened around her wrists, the tape sealed her mouth, the struggle grew weaker, her sobs muffled into silence. But Marcus didn't look away. He wanted her to see him, to know who was delivering this punishment. Her eyes, wide, pleading, met his. They weren't just eyes of fear. They were eyes of realization. She finally understood this wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't heartbreak. It was execution. Tasha's knees buckled as Marcus dragged her toward the trunk. The dirt clawed at her heels, her muffled cries fading under the heavy night. Every scrape, every stumble, echoed like a drumbeat leading toward the inevitable. The trunk opened with a metallic groan, cold, hollow, waiting. Marcus shoved her inside, the sound of her body hitting metal thundering in his ears. For a moment he stood there, staring down at her trembling form. And then he whispered, "Happy anniversary." The lid slammed shut. The sound echoed in the stillness. And just like that, Tasha's fate was sealed. To the outside world, Marcus was still the devoted husband, the man who forgave, the man who rebuilt. But here, under the cover of darkness, he had crossed a line no vow could erase. The gift had been delivered, and it was death. The night Tasha vanished, the world outside kept moving. Street lights flickered, sirens wailed in the distance, and couples strolled hand in hand across the city. But for Marcus, time had stopped. In the trunk of his car, his wife's body lay silent. The gift had been delivered. Now came the hardest part, erasing it.
Marcus drove slow at first, steady, keeping his nerves in check. His palms sweated against the wheel, but his face was calm, almost blank. He'd rehearsed this moment too many times to fall apart now. Every turn, every stoplight had been planned. He avoided cameras, took back roads, circled neighborhoods before moving on. This wasn't panic, it was strategy. But the body in his trunk was no strategy. It was weight. Weight that could not stay hidden forever. Marcus pulled into the old industrial district, where empty warehouses lined the cracked pavement. He knew no one came out here at night. He popped the trunk, the metallic groan sounding louder than ever. Tasha's lifeless eyes stared up at him, the gold chain he'd gifted her still gleaming against her skin. For the first time that night, Marcus hesitated. This was his wife, his queen, the woman he'd once sworn to protect. But then he remembered Darnell, the betrayal, the humiliation. His jaw tightened, and with one last glance, he lifted her out. The body was heavier than he expected. It took everything in him not to collapse under the weight. He dragged her toward a forgotten corner where weeds grew tall and trash piled against rusted fences. There, with the moon as his only witness, Marcus left her. No prayer, no goodbye, just silence. And then, as if nothing had happened, he drove away. By the next morning, Marcus was a new man. He posted smiling selfies, replied to texts, even sent a good morning family message in the group chat. When Tasha's coworkers called to ask why she hadn't shown up, Marcus told them she'd taken a personal day. When Keisha stopped by, worried, Marcus shrugged it off. She probably at her mama's, he said. Calm, steady, convincing. But as the days stretched on, the questions grew louder. Tasha's phone went straight to voicemail. Her mama hadn't seen her. Her best friend called the police. And suddenly, Marcus's life became a stage once again. This time, he wasn't the grieving husband in his own head. He had to perform it. When the cops knocked on his door, Marcus put on a show. Tears in his eyes, voice breaking, hands trembling as he described how Tasha went missing after their anniversary dinner. "I don't know what happened, officer. She never came home," he whispered, wiping fake tears from his face. Neighbors shook their heads, pitying him. Church folks prayed over him. Even the detectives, at first, nodded with sympathy. But behind closed doors, the police started noticing cracks. Marcus's story had holes. His timeline didn't add up. The restaurant confirmed they left together, but after that, no witnesses, no cameras, nothing. And when detectives pressed, Marcus snapped. "Y'all think I hurt my wife? Me? After everything I'd done for her?" The anger, the sudden shift, it didn't look like grief. It looked like guilt. Marcus thought he'd erased the truth, but the truth has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. And with every passing day, suspicion crept closer. Because while Marcus was playing the role of the grieving husband, the police were already moving in, piece by piece, to expose the murder he thought he'd buried in silence. For a few weeks, Marcus played his role flawlessly. To the outside world, he was the grieving husband. He organized prayer vigils, plastered missing person flyers across the neighborhood, even stood in front of TV cameras begging for his wife's safe return. But behind that performance, detectives were quietly unraveling his story.
The first red flag came from Marcus's timeline. He told police he dropped Tasha off at her mother's after dinner, but her mama swore she never saw her that night. In fact, she hadn't spoken to Tasha for days. Then came the phone records. Detectives subpoenaed Tasha's cell data and discovered her phone had pinged not at her mama's house, but in an abandoned industrial district. the same area Marcus used to work deliveries years back. And even more telling, the final call Tasha made that night was to Marcus. Not Darnell, not Keisha, not her mama, Marcus. The picture of a devoted husband began to crack. Detectives noticed the way Marcus's emotions shifted in interviews, how he'd cry one second and explode with anger the next. It wasn't grief, it was performance. Meanwhile, Tasha's best friend Keisha couldn't stay quiet. She told police about the affair with Darnell, about the way Marcus had been acting too calm in the days after Tasha went missing. He ain't grieving, Keisha said. He's plotting. Detectives dug deeper. They pulled surveillance footage from the highway. There it was, Marcus's car, late that night, heading toward the industrial district. Hours later, the same car came back, riding low like there was extra weight in the trunk. Marcus told police he went home straight after dinner, but the cameras told another story. The net was tightening. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Marcus's vehicle. At first glance, it looked spotless, freshly vacuumed, air freshener hanging from the mirror. But crime scenes leave traces, and in the seams of the trunk lining, the lab found fibers. Fibers that matched the silk of the black dress Tasha wore that night. Even more damning, faint smears of blood near the latch. Marcus had cleaned well, but not well enough. The community buzzed with whispers. Some still defended Marcus, calling him a strong black husband who stood by his wife, but others began to see the truth in his eyes. The coldness, the control, the way he carried himself like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. And drop it would. Detectives brought Marcus back in for questioning. This time, they didn't hold back. They laid the photos on the table, the car footage, the phone records, the fibers. Marcus, when detectives said, "Your story don't add up. You left with your wife that night. We know she never made it home. So where is she?" Marcus leaned back, jaw tight, eyes unblinking. He didn't answer. But silence in that room was as loud as a confession.
The walls were closing in. The husband who thought he'd orchestrated the perfect revenge was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. And all it would take was one discovery, one break in the case, to bring his whole world crashing down. For weeks, Marcus clung to his lie. He smiled at neighbors, hugged church members, and shook the hands of reporters with trembling fingers. On the surface, he was still the grieving husband searching for his wife. But detectives weren't fooled. They had the blood, the fibers, the cell records. The only missing piece, the one thing that could close the case, was Tasha herself. The search for her body became relentless. Police combed through vacant lots, drainage ditches, even dumpsters around the industrial district. Community volunteers joined in, holding candles in one hand and flyers in the other, hoping for answers. But night after night, the searches turned up nothing. Until one morning in early spring, a city worker cleaning near the old freight yard noticed something odd. Behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, the air carried a foul, heavy odor. It was the smell no one wanted to believe, the smell of death. When investigators arrived, they found a shallow ditch covered with scraps of sheet metal and broken cinder blocks. Underneath, the decomposed remains of a woman. Her clothes were shredded, her jewelry was missing, but the silk fabric still clinging to her skin told the story. It was Tasha, the missing wife, the mother, the young black woman who thought she'd built a life of promise. She was gone. The medical examiner later confirmed she'd been beaten with blunt force and strangled. Defensive wounds covered her hands, proving she fought desperately for her life. And the fibers in Marcus's trunk, they matched the dress she wore the night she died. The news hit the community like a thunderclap. Friends who had prayed for her safe return now wept openly in the streets. Murals went up on brick walls with her face. Candles lined sidewalks, and neighbors whispered one bitter truth: Marcus killed her. Detectives wasted no time. They pulled Marcus in again, this time with more than suspicion. They had the body, they had the evidence, they had the timeline. But Marcus, even with the weight of proof crushing him, still denied it. He said Tasha must have left with Darnell, that maybe it was a robbery gone wrong, that the cops were just looking for a black man to pin a murder on. But his calm cracked when they showed him photos of Tasha's body, her bruised neck, her broken nails, the silk fibers. He looked away. His eyes watered. For a split second, the mask slipped. Still, he refused to confess. But he didn't need to. His silence, his evasions, his contradictions, coupled with the physical evidence, were enough. Detectives gathered every shred they had, building a case brick by brick. As Marcus sat in the interrogation room, Keisha sat across town in her living room, crying into her hands. I told her to leave him before he did something crazy. She ain't listen.
The discovery of Tasha's body changed everything. No longer was it a missing person case. It was murder. Cold-blooded, calculated murder. And Marcus, the man who swore vows of love and loyalty, was now staring down the barrel of a life sentence. But Marcus wasn't done yet. Behind bars, he was already crafting a new story, one last desperate attempt to twist the truth and escape justice. The trial of Marcus Taylor was about to begin. And what unfolded in that courtroom would shock everyone who thought they already knew the story. The courthouse in Atlanta was packed. Reporters, church members, neighbors, even strangers who had followed every headline of Tasha's disappearance, they all came to witness the trial of Marcus Taylor. The once respected husband and church deacon now wore an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists. But even in chains, Marcus carried himself with arrogance, like a man convinced he still had control. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. They painted Marcus as a jealous, controlling husband who couldn't stand the thought of his wife having freedom. They showed the jury the timeline, the dinner that night, the missing hours, the highway footage. Then came the damning evidence, the fibers from Tasha's dress, the blood stains, and the shallow grave. Piece by piece, the prosecution dismantled Marcus's image of innocence. But Marcus wasn't about to sit quiet. His defense team spun a tale of conspiracy. They claimed Darnell, the ex-boyfriend, had motive. They argued Tasha had enemies. They even suggested the police had tunnel vision, targeting Marcus simply because he was the husband. In court, Marcus put on the performance of a lifetime. He cried on the stand, gripping the railing, swearing through tears that he loved his wife. He said, "She was my queen. I'd never hurt her, not in a million years." Some jurors shifted uncomfortably. Was it guilt, or could it be grief? But then came Keisha. When Tasha's best friend took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She told the jury about the phone calls, about Tasha's fears, about Marcus's anger. She said, "She told me, if anything ever happened to her, look at Marcus first." Gasps filled the courtroom. Next came the medical examiner. The testimony was brutal. Details of blunt force trauma, ligature marks, broken fingernails from scratching, clawing, fighting for her life. The examiner looked the jury in the eye and said, "This was no accident. This was homicide." The defense tried to shake the testimony, but the weight of the evidence was crushing. Every lie Marcus told collapsed under forensic proof. Still, Marcus kept his composure. He stared down jurors as if daring them to believe the worst about him. His eyes carried no remorse, only defiance. The closing arguments brought the trial to a fever pitch. The prosecution's final words rang through the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not a crime of passion. This was a planned act of revenge. Marcus Taylor vowed to protect his wife, but instead, he became her executioner. Now it is time to deliver justice. The jury left the room, leaving behind the weight of Marcus's lies and Tasha's silence. Hours ticked by. Families prayed. Reporters whispered. The city held its breath. When the jury finally returned, the foreman's face was stone cold. The clerk asked for the verdict, and the words that followed would change everything. Marcus Taylor stood tall, jaw set, as the foreman read the decision.
The courtroom was silent, thick with tension. Families clutched hands. Reporters leaned forward. Marcus stood tall at the defense table, his chin lifted, as if daring the world to judge him. The foreman's voice broke the silence. We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Taylor, guilty of murder in the first degree. Gasps echoed. Tasha's mother collapsed into tears, clutching a photograph of her daughter to her chest. Keisha sobbed openly, whispering, "Justice, baby girl, justice." Across the aisle, Marcus's mother shook her head violently, crying out, "Not my baby, not Marcus!" But the gavel slammed, silencing the room. For the first time, Marcus's mask cracked. His jaw trembled. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. The arrogance slipped, replaced by something else. Fear. Still, when the judge asked if he had any words before sentencing, Marcus spoke. "I didn't kill my wife," he said, his voice steady but hollow. "Y'all can believe what you want, but God knows the truth, and I'll die saying it." The judge stared down at him with cold, unblinking eyes. Then came the words Marcus could not escape. "Marcus Taylor, for the murder of your wife, Tasha Taylor, this court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Life. No parole. The room erupted. Some cheered, some wept, some cursed under their breath. And in the middle of it all, Marcus stood frozen, lips pressed tight, refusing to show weakness. But his hands trembled against the cuffs as deputies led him away. For Tasha's family, the verdict brought closure, but not peace. Her mother told reporters outside the courthouse, "My baby gone forever. No sentence can bring her back, but at least he can't hurt nobody else." Keisha, her voice breaking, said, "She trusted him. She gave him everything, and he gave her death. That ain't love. That's evil." Across the Atlanta community, the Black community wrestled with the verdict. Some said justice had been served. Others whispered about generational trauma, about Black men demonized in courtrooms. But beneath all the noise, one truth remained. Marcus had made his choice, and now he would live with it behind bars.
The trial was over, the verdict delivered. Marcus Taylor would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for the people left behind, the sentence didn't erase the scars. For Tasha's mother, every day was a reminder of the daughter she lost. She still set a place for her at Sunday dinner, still kept her room untouched, perfume bottles lined neatly on the dresser. Sometimes, she whispered, "I open the closet just to smell her clothes. That's all I got left." Keisha carried her own burden, survivor's guilt, regret. She replayed her last conversation with Tasha over and over in her head, how she warned her to leave Marcus, how Tasha promised she would. "If only I'd pushed harder," she said through tears, "maybe she'd still be here." The Black community in Atlanta carried the weight too. They saw themselves in Tasha, young, hopeful, working hard to build a family. They also saw themselves in Marcus, charming on the outside, broken on the inside, another black man who had choices but chose destruction. Church members whispered about the signs they had missed, the controlling tone, the way Marcus never let Tasha speak for herself, the arguments after service. They wondered if by staying silent, they had failed her. And for young women across the neighborhood, Tasha's murder became a warning, a reminder that love without respect, love built on control, can turn deadly. As for Marcus, he remains in his cell, writing, rambling, repeating his twisted narrative. But out here, beyond the prison gates, his story is no longer his to control. It belongs to Tasha, to the people who loved her, to the community that mourns her. Tasha's life was short, but her story is a cry for change, a cry for women to be heard, to be protected, to walk away from love that hurts before it destroys. And a reminder that sometimes the person you trust the most is the one holding the knife. This was the story of Marcus Taylor, the husband who turned his wedding vow into a death sentence. But more than that, it's Tasha's story, a black woman whose light was stolen too soon. Her memory lives on, and her truth must be told. If this story moved you, if you believe voices like Tasha's deserve to be heard, don't let her name fade. Subscribe to Crime Vault right now so you never miss another story like this. Together we shine a light on the darkest truths, and we keep the memory of victims alive. Because here at Crime Vault, every story matters.